Agenda 21 is the action plan. It's the blueprint to inventory and control all land, all water, all plants, all minerals, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all information, all energy, all education, and all human beings in the world.
Hey guys, welcome to my channel Anarchy for Freedom, India's home for conspiracy research and free thinking. If you like my content, please hit the bell icon in YouTube, comment and like my videos, share them as far as possible so I can reach more people. And please subscribe to my email list. I've put it in the links down below so you can hit that and I can reach you directly. Today's video and the videos that will be following from now for a while will be on the topic of Agenda 21 in India, wherein I'll be taking you through what Agenda 21 is, what its implications are for Indian society, and what are its goals, and how do those goals come into India and play out in India in specific ways through Indian characters working with the globalists and the elite. So before I go on to tell you what Agenda 21 really is, what are my interpretations of it and of people who've been looking at this agenda and studying it closely for a long time, let's take an official definition of sorts from none other than the Fountain of Truth, the United Nations itself.
This September, 193 countries will meet at the UN to adopt new global goals. These 17 goals provide a roadmap that will help the world achieve sustainable development. But what exactly is sustainable development and how does it affect us? Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. But what does that mean? Everyone understands the need to grow their economies, but not everyone takes into account the negatives that unbalanced economic growth can have on the environment and on people's well-being. It's time to change that by looking at the world in a different way. The Sustainable Development Goals will help us to do that. Sustainable development is about the big picture. It's about improving the lives of everyone, everywhere, and achieving all these things together. But it's also about the details. That means we want economies to grow, companies to thrive, and people to have decent work. We want to create new, innovative technologies, but not by harming the environment. We want everyone to have access to nutritious food regardless of where they live. We want affordable and quality education for everybody, not just a few. We want freedom of speech, but we don't want that to mean violence. But how can we achieve all of this, and where do we even start? Well, the 17 goals will mean member states, alongside civil society stakeholders and major groups, will be working together for the next 15 years, looking at ways we can do business differently so that everyone gains. With these 17 global goals as our guide, we can achieve sustainable development and live in a world where people and planet benefit. But we have to act now. This is the time for global action. To find out how you can get involved and learn more about the goals, go to www.un.org/sustainable development.
I don't know about you, but that sounded like the most meaningless propagandistic jargon I've heard in a long time. And it doesn't really explain anything. It's just a sugar-coated fairy tale version of what these people are really working towards and trying to accomplish. To get a more meaningful answer of our question on what Agenda 21 is, let's turn to some researchers who've been looking at this for a really long time and get their opinion on what this really means for us.
Agenda 21 is the action plan. It's the blueprint to inventory and control all land, all water, all plants, all minerals, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all information, all energy, all education, and all human beings in the world.
In a nutshell, the plan calls for governments to take control of all land use and not leave any of the decision-making in the hands of private property owners. It is assumed that people are not good stewards of their land, and the government will do a better job if it is in control. Individual rights, in general, are to give way to the needs of communities, as determined by a globalist governing body. Moreover, people should be rounded up off of the land and packed into human settlements or islands of human habitation, as they are called in the UN Agenda 21 documents, close to employment centers and transportation. Another program, called the Wildlands Project, spells out how most of the land is to be set aside for non-humans. In anticipation of our objections to such plans, our civil rights will be dissolved.
What's happening is that there's a massive resource grab going on all over the planet. And when I say resource grab, you have to put yourself in Rockefeller's shoes and the banker's shoes, the Rothschild shoes and whatever, and say, what do you do when money wears out? What do you do? When you sucked all the value you can out of the monetary systems you created, what's left? Well, you and I don't think about those sort of things because we don't have that much money. But these people at the top, especially the bankers, I'm sure they stay up at night thinking, what's after money? What comes after money? Today, as money has been sucked dry, the only thing left to do is to make a grab for the resources themselves. And that's what sustainable development is all about, is taking the resources of the world away from you and me, away from private companies that aren't part of the clique, if you will, and putting them into a global common trust that will be managed by them for their benefit.
The UN Paris Agreement, most expensive treaty in world history. The Green New Deal estimates up to 93 or $4 trillion, hammering families with unnecessary energy costs. We have gas tax proposals, 50 cents a gallon. Would you rather have bad storms or pay 50 cents a gallon? I'm sorry. So if we all agree to pay 50 cents a gallon, we're going to get less hurricanes and tornadoes and floods and droughts? What era are we living in? They're essentially saying your SUV controls the weather the same as your car controls it. So it's a way to transform the economy, massive wealth redistribution, massive central planning, with literally bean counters affecting every aspect of your life. And I say that because the UN chief has actually said we need to treat meat eaters the same way we treat smokers and relegate them to a section of a restaurant or outside or ban it completely. We need to stop gas-powered cars, ban that, make them all electric, despite the fact that electric uses all sorts of rare earth minerals that you need massive amounts of fossil fuels to get, and battery technology, and they're no more earth-friendly. We need to affect our diet, agriculture. They're going after cows. They're going after your appliances, Energy Star, Department of Energy, every aspect of your life. Your washing machines, your dishwashers, less efficient, more efficient, but less powerful than they were 15 years ago. Low-end appliances 15 years ago outperform high-end ones today because the government is slowly choking the life out of everything and making them less and less powerful, all in the name of saving the planet.
That sounds quite different from the meaningless platitudes of the United Nations, right? Hopefully, as you can see by now, Agenda 21 has nothing to do with saving the planet. But what they're actually trying to do is using our natural urge to protect the environment as an excuse to take away all our freedoms and essentially monopolize all the resources on the planet, whether it be manufacturing, production, distribution, control of the land, the ecosystems, deserts, forests, wildlife, oceans, you name it, even down to the individual itself. They want total control over everything because, as Patrick would suggested, if you had all the money in the world and you sucked all the world's wealth dry, what would you do next? Before we take a good look at what the goals and motives of Agenda 21 are and try to put them into context, let's get a handle on where Agenda 21 really originated from and why it's gained so much momentum today. We can trace this back at least to the 40s with the rise of the technocracy movement in America, but more concrete links start emerging during the Habitat 1 and 2 conferences of the UN, wherein this idea that private property, in the sense the private property that we own, is a threat to the planet and a threat to our future. This idea emerged from the Habitat 1 and 2 conferences and gained some momentum from there. After this, the Brundtland Commission issued a report called Our Common Future, and this came in 1987. This commission was chaired by a lady called Gro Harlem Brundtland. To those of you who don't know, she was a member of something called the Trilateral Commission, which is a body founded by two big time notorious globalist insiders, part of this cabal that I'm talking about, David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski. And the main goal of the Trilateral Commission, in their own words, is to establish, quote unquote, a new economic order. This is the world government, world technocratic, fascist, global central bank dystopia I've been talking about in a more watered down language. This commission basically laid the groundwork for the sustainable development movement, and a lot of the ideas that come forward through in Agenda 21 are presented in the report of Our Common Future. This commission was also chaired by a character called Maurice Strong, who was a big time Rockefeller oilman and insider of this cabal. Having gleaned some historical understanding about the origins of this agenda, let's turn to taking a closer look at what its real goals and motives are. Starting with an end to national sovereignty, state planning and management of all land resources, ecosystems, deserts, forests, oceans, mountains, and fresh water, agriculture, rural development, biotechnology, and ensuring that there is equity, which means equal slavery, really. The state to define the role of business and financial resources, abolition of private property, they'll say it's not sustainable, restructuring the family unit, children raised by the state, people told what their job will be, major restrictions on movement, creation of human settlement zones, mass resettlement of as people are forced to vacate the land where they live, dumbing down the population, which had been achieved a long time ago, really, and mass global depopulation in pursuit of all of the above objectives. Hopefully, as you can see by now, this agenda has nothing to do with saving the planet or conserving resources, but it's really about making us hand over control of all the resources of the planet to a tiny number of people and establishing neo feudalism on the planet. Neo feudalism being the concept where a few people own all the resources and other people have to take permission from these people in order to be able to use the resources or conduct some kind of business with them. To be honest, they've played it very cleverly here because they're making it look like Agenda 21 is this sort of non binding global emerging consensus which nations don't have to really abide by, but they can choose to implement it if they want to. But what's really going on behind the scenes is that the United Nations has spawned off an organization called Local Governments for Sustainability, abbreviated as ICLEI. And while making it look like this agenda is non binding, what they're really doing is getting local municipal bodies to tie up with ICLEI so that these municipal bodies implement Agenda 21 policies in their neighborhood, at the same time making them look like these policies were grassroots and organic and something that the local communities came up by themselves to begin with. As we can see on the screen here, most municipal bodies in India are part of this. You can see Thane Municipal Corporation is a part of this here in our city. And even the BMC, Greater Mumbai Municipal Corporation, is a part of this here. What they're doing is they're pushing Agenda 21 policies through all of these different corporations in India and making it look like they're coming up with them on their own. And this will become really extremely significant in the future when I put into context what's happened with RA, what's going on with the Coastal Road project, what's happening with development issues in Mumbai plays into this and is connected with this fundamentally. To get a glimpse of the world that these people are trying to create, we can gain some idea from a movie called Hunger Games, in which they really showed some of the strands of what the future society that they're working towards will look like. This includes this elite that lived in the capital, which lived off, unlike most of the normal ordinary population, was living in those areas in total serfdom and slavery. If you see the movie, it becomes obvious that these areas were cordoned off, and the only mode of transport for the slaves in that society was high speed rail. The elite essentially enjoyed all the luxuries and things that were available in society, whereas the ordinary population was really restricted from traveling. They did not have any access to the areas that the elite could access, which, in terms of what they're trying to create now, is blocking us into these human settlement zones and keeping us from accessing most of the resources and the biodiversity on the planet, which will be sanctioned of human use, where we will not be able to enter those areas and access them. These people are trying to create a world where we are ruled by technocrats, which means experts in banking, business, finance, science, economics, etc., who will never essentially see a ballot box in their life, meaning we will never be able to vote in someone, but these experts will be appointed and will be governing society and micromanaging society and establishing a total surveillance state wherein all production and distribution will be monitored and our habits will be tweaked. Something like, you ate too much meat this week and your quota does not allow you to eat more meat going forward, or you used too much water this week, so now we're going to restrict your water use, and things on those lines. They're trying to create a world fascist government which essentially dictates to the entire planet, coupled with a world army which polices the will of the world government on the entire planet, and a world central bank with a digital cashless currency, which has major implications for financial sovereignty and freedom. All of this coupled with a microchip population, which will be connected to a global artificial intelligence hive mind of sorts, wherein all our activities will be surveilled, even down to the level of thought. As you can see in the image here, this is the kind of structure they want to create. They want a world government at the top, and then under that, basically, they want these super states. Like we have the European Union already, but the ones which will be emerging will be the American Union, which will be a sort of amalgamation of North America and South America. They want the Pacific Union, which eventually India will be a part of if they proceed that way. They want the African Union, which is already pretty much in place. And also, not on this list is the Middle Eastern Union, which they want to carve out after engineering some sort of chaotic situation like a big war in the Middle East, through which they will create a super state in the Middle East. Under that, they want basically mega regions built on fractured lines of nations. So they won't be nations, but since they want to break up sovereignty, they will be constructing these mega regions intersecting among different nations. And we can see this in Europe, for example, wherein we can see in this diagram how they want a reshaped view of Europe, wherein this mega region is passing through different countries. And this is being done in an effort to break culture, to break things that bind people to nationalism. And I'm not saying that's a good thing either, but it's just their agenda, and we have to see it in that context in order to make sense of it. Also, these mega regions can be seen in America's map. This is something called Mega Regions of America, the Emerging Mega Regions of America 2050. And you can see how they've basically constructed these mega regions, and exactly coupled on them almost are these trans-American passenger networks, which Barack Obama announced suddenly out of nowhere. I mean, once the planes and air travel started kicking off, rail development almost became non existent. But for some reason, Obama and Cameron and all these people in America and Britain, for example, announced in their presidencies these long term plans going up to 2030 to scale up the high speed rail networks. And if you see these high speed rail networks, at least in this American example, are overlapping exactly the mega regions which are planned for America in 2050. We can also see this with the map of simulated reserve and corridor system in America. And as you can see here, the areas that are meant for human use, for normal human use, are in light blue. And it's almost, like 10 or 20% of the map, literally. And everything else is core reserves and corridors, little to no human use, which are red. And the buffer zones, which are highly regulated use, which are in yellow, which occupy most of the area on the map, essentially. So basically, the kind of structure that they want to establish is a world government under which there'll be these super states like the European Union, under which there'll be these mega regions like I showed you in the European example, and then under that, we'll have something called human settlement zones, which are these urban areas that are meant for human use that I spoke about, and they're called the term human settlement zones in these Agenda 21 documents. So essentially, what they're trying to do is pack us into these human settlement zones wherein most of the area of the country, eventually the mega region, will be unavailable to us for human use, as I showed you in the American example with the blue areas strictly meant for human use, and the rest were either highly regulated or just cordoned off straight off for normal ordinary humans. At this point you might be wondering, alright, this sounds a little far-fetched. How are they going to move so many people off the land and pack them into these areas like you're talking about? And I have two simple answers to these things. One of them is they want to reduce the global population so that managing and moving people around becomes very easy. And they want a war on indigenous and tribal people and people living off grid, which I will be showing you right now through many instances in India itself. So let's look at a few case reports to make sense of this. Here is a statement by ex-central bank head Raghuram Rajan saying India should move out of agriculture into industry and services. The society has always found ways to adapt to changing times even when there have been fears of machines replacing humans. This is not just him, it's been literally monetary policy of our central bank to work on these lines wherein they want people to get out of agriculture into manufacturing and services. What this means is they want people to get out of rural areas and get into these urban cities like I'm speaking about. So this is one factor that ties into that. Another one is our Supreme Court in February this year literally ordered the eviction of millions of people whose land rights claims have been rejected by them. And this ties into the Modi government planning a more draconian version of the colonial era Indian Forest Act, wherein if you dig into the details of this, there's a draft document that leaked out which was formed between India's new Minister of Environment and Forests and lawyers and forestry officials and the CEO of the World Wildlife Fund in India. Keep this in mind. I'll be going into the World Wildlife Fund very soon and explaining why their involvement in policy in India is a really, really bad thing. And here are some of the new policies which this act supposedly includes. I mean, we don't know for sure because it's not out yet, but this is a leak, so take it with a grain of salt. A huge program of militarization of India's forest and tiger reserves with thousands of officials routinely armed. Forest department officials given the right to shoot people to prevent forest offences and enjoy virtual immunity from prosecution. Forest officers given the right to shoot, search, seize property and arrest citizens, while the burden of proving innocence would lie with the accused. The undermining of groundbreaking legislation that sought to redress the historical injustices to India's tribal people. State government able to take away forest rights in the name of conservation. This is revealing a lot, if you understand things from my perspective, because what they're trying to do with Agenda 21 is essentially take over these lands in the name of sustainability and conservation and chuck the tribal people out of the land. If you put all of this together and look at the bigger picture, this makes total sense of why our cities are getting crowded and we have so many people coming into the city with such shortage of space. I mean, you just have to look at the other station at 6 o'clock to get an instance of what I'm talking about if you aren't from Mumbai. And it also makes sense from what just went down in RA. Because the metro shed that the government was trying to build there could have been built at Kalina or could have been built at Kanjurmarg. There were other locations where the trees and an ecosystem wouldn't have to be destroyed to make the metro possible. But hopefully now you understand with all of the stuff I told you about the high speed rail networks and why they want it to be the dominant form of transport in the future, why the government is pushing ahead with it so desperately, and RA kills two birds in one stone because they also get to take over the land and the forest area, which they recognize as a forest actually, but it was, the documents for that went missing somehow. So they get to take over that land, and they also get to check out the tribal people who are living in that land, who are living relatively sustainably without having to depend much on the government. And the governments who have a war on tribal people, like I just showed you in all the instances that have been going on in India with the Supreme Court and all the other machinations involving the World Wildlife Fund and forestry officials, etc. When it comes to the high speed rail networks and the mega cities and human settlement zones, we can already see how they have this plan for India very well, like it's shown in this article by the World Economic Forum, which is basically a place where the elite meet in Davos every year to have discussions on key global issues. And almost every year, Bill Gates, George Soros, all these big time insider billionaires are attending these meetings and shaping public opinion on where the world is headed. And it says India will have 7 megacities by 2030 UN. Just like we saw in the example I showed you about America and Britain, expect our government to go forward very aggressively with these high speed rail projects, starting with cities. Obviously, I mean, Delhi has its own metro setup, Mumbai is going forward with full speed, Ahmedabad, all the other places, and watch for intercity rail networks to start coming up between Delhi, Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Hyderabad, Bangalore, and all the places that were listed in that article. I don't just mean the rail networks we have today, I mean the high speed metro kind of projects that are being built in our city and other cities. And they will lay it out in such a way where these high speed rail projects will be the only things that will be connecting these cities, and we will not be able to have air travel or go by road. Some other ways in which they will try to get people off the land would be engineered financial collapses. I mean, this is a topic for another video itself, so I'll just throw it out there and let you make up your mind on what you think about that. Engineering the weather. This sounds really far fetched, but there are US Air Force documents going back to the 90s and European Commission meetings who have given statements on this about nations possessing the ability to manipulate the weather and engineer storms, droughts, hurricanes, that kind of thing. I mean, there are even UN conventions which ban countries from using weather as a weapon of war. I mean, if it wasn't possible, there wouldn't be any conventions or treaties on it. And this is a good example of how certain technologies have been suppressed in the public arena, because a person called Nikola Tesla, who's really behind a lot of the inventions and the things that we use today in society, was creating earthquakes and hurricanes and shattering his neighbors' windows back in the 1930s and 40s by using this technology in his own area. I can understand if you still think it's too far out and can't conceive of it, but would you not take India's ex-environmental minister Anil Dave's words seriously if he spoke about the same thing? Here's an article from the Economic Times which talks about Anil Dave's statement that he told the Rajya Sabha. The US has developed a type of weapon called High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project, popularly known as HARP. And he says that HARP strikes the upper atmosphere with a focused and steerable electromagnetic beam, which has the capability to manipulate the weather. So go through this article and you can read what else he said. And this person surprisingly landed up dead a couple months after that. I mean, you can look at all the anomalies here about this writer talking about how he had met Anil Dave, and he is supposedly the most, like, one of the most healthiest people he had met, and it was a really big shocker for him that he could just die of a heart attack. And here's an interesting case where Madhya Pradesh High Court dismisses PIL seeking probe into Anil Madhav Dave's death. And it says an activist in his petition had claimed that a cartel of multinational corporations was putting pressure on the central government to give permission for commercial farming of genetically modified mustard, and that Anil Dave, with his nationalist ideology, was not in favor of it. This case of Anil Dave apparently dying of a heart attack brings in two key aspects of this agenda. One of them being his opposition to genetically modified foods, which I'll be going into a little later in the population control section, and weather modification, which I already alluded to earlier. Other ways in which they try to get the people of the land would be excessive regulation. For how, like for example, how raw milk is declared illegal in some states in America, and there's just burgeoning red tape and overregulation, which makes small farmers and small businessmen not able to survive and go bankrupt eventually, which moves them out of the area, and that land gets cleared for big corporations who are connected with this network to go and take over the land. Other ways in which they would do this would be to declare growing your own food being illegal, and collecting your own rainwater on your own property being illegal. I mean, it sounds too far-fetched and dystopian, but sadly, certain places on the planet already have laws like this, wherein there have been instances where people serving food to homeless people have landed up being arrested, and their gardens have been destroyed by the police and the law enforcement. This brings me to the point about how financially are they going to take away the land from these people, and what is the mechanism through which they would make this happen. This ties in certain key global institutions and players like the Global Environment Facility, and it also brings in the World Wildlife Fund, which has a notorious historical basis for its activities, and it was founded by people like Prince Philip, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, Godfrey Rockefeller, and Julian Huxley, who also created UNESCO. The Global Environment Facility is essentially creating something called debt for nature swaps, which is a fancy way of saying that they approach countries who have undertaken massive amount of debt from organizations like the IMF and World Bank, which again are connected to this cabal. And when the countries can't pay back these loans because of the massive amount of debt that they've been put under, these organizations come forward, like the Global Environment Facility, and tell the nation that we will forgive a certain amount of your debt if you take away certain land in the country and keep it for conservation and sustainability, what is called conservation and sustainability, but it's essentially a land grab from the native indigenous population of the people. It also brings me to an organization called the World Wildlife Fund, which, if you remember, I mentioned in connection to the draft bill that is supposedly leaked and is under the pipeline to be introduced in India. And the World Wildlife Fund has a shady history. It's been formed by notorious characters and Satanists and pedophiles like Prince Philip, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, Godfrey Rockefeller, and Julian Huxley. I'm not saying all of those people are Satanists and pedophiles, but Prince Philip is one of them for sure. And the World Wildlife Fund has a really bad reputation of going into countries and stealing tribal people's land, essentially. I mean, I can give you example after example of how this has happened in different countries, including India. These include the Aborigines of Padan Island, the Baruha Pygmies of Zaire, the Bambuti Pygmies, the Baka Pygmies, the Batwa Pygmies of Rwanda, the Sanies of Kenya, the Hayom Bushmen, and finally the Gujar nomads of UP, who were essentially chucked out by the World Wildlife Fund and the Indian Forest Authorities. And you can look at that case later in this article. Some other key pillars of this agenda are its privacy implications for people on the planet. So the kind of world they want to create is one that looks a lot like where China is headed right now, wherein everyone is allocated a social credit score by the government depending on how good of a citizen you are, good in quotes, wherein your points will be reduced if, say for example, you're against authority, or you have negative views about the people who are in power or the people you associate with, etc., etc. And these points have a real world effect on what happens in your day-to-day life. For example, if you have low points, then someone who is calling you might get a message on the other side of the phone saying that this person is on the blacklist and he has a bad social credit score, so you should think before speaking to him, because that person talking to you would also impact their social credit score. You could also be stopped from traveling to certain places because you have a low social credit score, which again ties in the restrictions on movement that I was talking about earlier. You could be denied a loan, for example. Your child could be denied going to a school, and a lot of other implications that the social credit score that is given to you by the government would entail for your life and your freedom. They want a tab on everything that's produced and consumed, for which it would require total surveillance. And this would sound a little off during the 1940s when the technocracy movement was really gaining momentum in America. And these are the goals of the technocracy movement from back in the 40s, wherein they wanted technocrats to have full control over the economy and to have full surveillance over what is being produced and consumed so they could do the right magic tricks and get everything in order. And it doesn't seem so far fetched now because we have the technological capability of making that happen for them with things like 5G, the Internet of Things, smart everything, all these smart devices that are coming up. They're not to make you feel more connected to the internet or to give you more features. I mean, that's a byproduct. But what they're made for is to spy on you and to track everything you're doing. And you don't have to take this from me. We can look at quotes from a couple big time insiders. One of them being Zbigniew Brzezinski, the main character I mentioned, who was behind the creation of the Trilateral Commission. One of whose members was behind the draft policy of what became Agenda 21 initially. And he says, and this is in 1970, let me tell you, the technotronic era involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite, unrestrained by traditional values. Soon it will be possible to assert almost continuous surveillance over every citizen and maintain up-to-date complete files containing even the most personal information about the citizen. These files will be subject to instantaneous retrieval by the authorities. Again, this was written in 1970. And we can see more recent examples of this with this US intelligence chief James Clapper saying we might use the Internet of Things to spy on you. It's not might, they are using it already. And CIA Director David Petraeus, who said we'd spy on you through your dishwasher. And you can read this article for knowing about more things that he said on this subject. And this brings in the topic of Aadhaar, which again is a whole video unto itself. Not even one video, it deserves multiple videos. But needless to say, Aadhaar is crucial to this agenda of surveillance. And eventually, Aadhaar is meant to evolve into a microchip which will go in your hand, wherein the kind of society that we're moving towards, the social credit system that I explained, everything that you will function in society through, whether it be a credit card, whether it be a license, whether it be a passport, all of that will be loaded onto that microchip, and you could essentially be turned off centrally by the system, and you wouldn't have any other recourse to get by to use those services. That's how bad these people wanted to get. And all dissidents and people who have a problem with the kind of system they're trying to create will be eliminated or will be deprived of food or will be stopped from getting all the services I mentioned simply because their microchip was turned off. Along with all the surveillance implications of this agenda, they also want to cram us into these micro apartments, which are literally 10 feet by 30 feet, smaller than what your kitchen looks like currently. And these were initially inaugurated a couple of years ago by the mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg, and they are going worldwide. I mean, you can see trends of this all over the world. And this has come to Mumbai as well. Like you can see in this article, Mumbai sees spike in affordable, state-of-the-art micro housing projects. Apartments as small as 189 square feet would cost buyers more than half crore in central locations. 53 lakh to be precise. However, these flats are not your conventional spacious flats. Rather, these are micro projects that are crafted to save space and provide all the amenities within a cramped area. These new wave of micro apartments with state-of-the-art facilities are gaining traction in Mumbai. These are the kind of houses they want us to live in, wherein your dining table will come out of the wall and your sofa will turn into a bed, and all these things that cramp up everything we need in this really small slave like area. And the public mind will kind of be molded into this by pushing this propaganda that we are destroying the planet by our carbon footprint, and thus we need to scale down the kind of apartments and the luxury that we're living in, so that we can't use enough appliances in the house or can't have such a big house because we'd be using a lot of energy to do the same. And they will also try to push in some regulations which will make it mandatory for builder to start building small houses which meet the green requirements. And not to forget, a lot of people will simply be priced out of buying these huge houses because, as we can see, governments are taking over land all over the country, essentially rendering them useless for society. And that results in higher housing costs, coupled with a crumbling financial system wherein people's financial security and future are in big jeopardy with respect to the moves that are coming in the financial system, which again are a subject of a different video and I can't go into here. The health aspect of this and the goals of reducing the human population are fundamentally interconnected, according to me, because if you look around, there's actually a war on health that's taking place. Whether it's bombarding us with electromagnetic fields and the upcoming 5G, which has really disastrous consequences for human health, as mentioned by a lot of scientists in the last year or two. Genetically modified foods, the making of vaccines mandatory and enforcing them onto children and adults, spraying the sky with toxic chemicals, the promotion of vegetarian and vegan diets, which, in my opinion, are destroying fertility among women and rendering a lot of women incapable to conceive because of the lack of fat soluble vitamins and other essential nutrients that are lacking from vegan diets these days. These tools, along with a lot more, are being used by the global elite to systematically cull and reduce the human population. And this is not to mention the engineered wars that take place and the upcoming agenda of manifesting a third world war, essentially, wherein the NATO forces and the West will be put into conflict with Russia, China, Iran axis. And this is the kind of war that has been on the books and been a part of the plan for a really long time if you start to dig into the research and look into the writings of these characters and what they've said over the years. For those of you out there like me who are really passionate about their health and try their best to take control of it, whether by eating whole, organic, non GMO, pastured foods, or by doing all the lifestyle changes they can, like, getting enough sunlight and thinking about near infrared saunas and things like that. They want an end to all of that and they want to enforce an allopathic model on the entire population where even the discussion of alternate treatments and natural treatments are about to be banned. And this is being done under the auspices of an organization called Codex Alimentarius, which you need to look up and research if you want more information on this. The kind of medical treatments that are about to be coming in the future are going to be smart pills, which, as you can see on the screen, are microchip pills which we'll essentially be taking into our bodies, and the microchip will send a signal or a message to your doctor and the authorities that you have taken the pill. And this sounds fine and not problematic when you think about, okay, if I have a disease, then the doctor obviously wants me to take the medicine and it helps with compliance. But imagine if you're falsely diagnosed for a disease, like say you're falsely declared as schizophrenic because the government and the authorities don't like what you're doing, or infinite number of examples. Then the authorities and the medical mafia can essentially spy on you and see if you're even taking the medication or not and eventually force you to take them. That's the kind of world that we're heading into now. The final pillar of this is how are they going to enforce all of this? And that involves the police and the military, who, if you've read my writings and you've explored my website, in my opinion, are order following authoritarian worshippers who will literally do anything that the state tells them to do without actually using their own conscience and thinking for themselves whether the action that they're committing is right and wrong. And even the police and military humans are meant to be replaced eventually by robots and artificial intelligence run robots. So all these people in the police and military who are thinking now their jobs are safe, and the same thing goes for politicians and all the other people who are involved in enforcing this agenda on us. They are as much a victim of this as everyone else is. And all of their jobs and their financial safety are in jeopardy, because once this agenda moves to a point where robots can be introduced, they will take over the police and military and essentially robotically enforce whatever commands are given by the state down upon us. And it's not like the police and military don't already do that, but at least they have some semblance of conscience in them. If there's any left, obviously, among some people there is. This is why a lot of people are starting to quit the police force now. Not in India, but at least around the world. And I don't know about India, but there are many cases wherein the police, seeing the kind of callous and destructive attitude that is building within the forces, they're starting to leave the police force and trying to look for other ways in which they can serve society without harming people, essentially. To sum it all up, I'd like to show you an article which kind of gives a gist of the world that we're heading into. It's written by Ida Auken, who is a member of parliament of Denmark. And it says, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, I have no privacy, and life has never been better. Welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city, or should I say our city. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense for us in this city. Everything you consider a product has now become a service. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, and all the things we need in our daily lives. One by one, all these things became free, so it ended up not making sense for us to own much." This is like a played down version of the kind of future that they're moving us towards, and they're making it sound like it's good and it's not that bad. But if you read behind the lines of this, what they're trying to portray essentially is that you'll be living in a world where you don't own anything, which means the micro apartments that I mentioned, they won't be yours. When you go out of your house, they could be given to someone who wants to conduct a business meeting. And everything that you need in your house, whether it's your appliances and all of that, won't be yours. They will be sent to you via drones as and when you need them. And you won't really have a car. You will be just using the car as a service without having to own a car. And on and on and on, basically for every other area of your life in a similar fashion. So, as dystopian and technocratic and depressing as all of this sounds, I'd like to leave this video on a slightly lighter note by showing you this animated video of the society that these people are taking us towards.
Oh, hi. I'm so glad you're on time. I'm V. I'm looking forward to showing you around Plandopolis today. My husband works from home. He's a virtual engineer working on one of the city's desalination plants. He controls the robots who do all the important maintenance. I think he basically plays computer games for a living. You ready to go? Have you got your calorie card open on your smartphone? I registered your visit with Slick Travel Corp the other day, so they've allotted you a journey time to match mine. It makes so much sense, doesn't it? Switch off brain and go to work. With this many people around, I'm glad there's a mega computer in charge. We're so lucky. Our kids were allocated a school quite near my practice, so I can drop them off on the way. It saves on our calorie ration. Well, it won't be long until the little darlings get their career announcements. They've been working so hard, so I'm sure they'll get something good. Not that there's anything wrong with fixing carbon scrubbers for a living or anything. Are you hungry? Let's pop to the market as we're passing. Right, what's on the menu this month? No, not meat. It's not your birthday. The Global Food Council are doing a really good job of keeping food production going. I mean, you don't get the choice you used to, but we're better off than most. I think it's probably easiest to walk from here. You barely see a car in the city centre nowadays, unless you're rich. Well, the state knows they just aren't practical anymore. We're all trying to meet our global carbon deal. Electric bikes are so much better for getting around our neighbourhood. And why waste valuable space on car parks when you can use them to grow food? I don't care what you say, Alex. They don't deserve to live in that ghetto. They are completely disconnected. No high-speed transport system, no new internet. They miss out on jobs and many essential services too. Oh, hi again. What a day. I had to make an emergency visit to the Cry Freedom ghettos. I mean, I miss my sister like mad, but I'm glad they went when they moved to New Amsterdam. They're safe from climate change on the floating city. That must be her now. It's much easier to meet up with friends virtually now. So many cities have banned cars in central areas. Ooh, looks like she's got some juicy gossip.
As we can see, this agenda is really dark and they want to essentially destroy humanity and destroy all of us. And I think this information is really important for Indians to get, because the way we've been going down this road thus far is because people have no awareness this is going on, and people within our country are working towards this. And if you want to stop this and turn the direction around wherein we can head into a society that's free and voluntary and is not based on coercion and authoritarianism and violence, then we have a responsibility to awaken others to the information, get this information to them, share it with everyone, and help them to see what's going on. So we can collectively do something about this. Because trust me, I mean, me making a video here, I as an individual am not going to change much. I mean, I'll obviously share this information, and if it reaches more people, then I will be able to have an impact. But the impact will only be possible if it reaches a larger number of audience, and that audience considers this message and thinks about it and wants to do something about the kind of society that we're heading towards. So please, if you find this information important, share it with people, convey it to people, just help them to start looking at these things and get them to look at it, because my freedom and your freedom and all our freedoms rest on the population becoming aware and stopping this insanity and massacre from happening. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.